Nothing sits at the center of a stressful cinematic Venn diagram quite like a good mystery. From building tension to shocking twists and everything in between, it's time to take a look at some of the best movie mysteries of all time. First things first, I will forever believe that a good mystery is never unwelcome. In that sense, it's also hard to classify mysteries as a genre unto themselves. I prefer to think of a good mystery as an ingredient in some other genre's entree. So, for me, it's not a mystery with sci-fi trappings so much as a sci-fi film with added intrigue, which may be splitting hairs to an unreasonable extent, but that's a mystery of my own to work out. With all that said, let's take a look one trope at a time at what makes a compelling mystery on screen. Now, nobody ever did it so gracefully or so formulaically, but not in a bad way, as Agatha Christie. So, in an effort to make Poirot proud, let's gather some intriguing suspects at an isolated country estate and try to assemble the perfect movie mystery. Every movie needs a setting, and every story has one. For a proper mystery, though, the setting has an oversized obligation. The where and when of a mystery absolutely must add to the ambiance, the intrigue, the overall sense that there's foul play afoot. This is the stuffy apartment of Rear Window and the glimpses of L.B. Jeffries' neighbors' lives spied from across the courtyard. It's the unknowable zone from Annihilation and the effect it has on the protagonists. Ditto for the zone in Tarkovsky's Stalker. It's the film grain-infused grit of Minority Report's Future, the rubble-strewn streets of Vienna after the war in The Third Man, the wonder and the rugged isolation of the Irish Midlands in the 1860s, or the glitzy and noirish 1950s Los Angeles of LA Confidential. But for our favorite setting, we're going back to high school and another neo-noir gem, Rian Johnson's Brick.
I want to run some names past you. Hold it, we're not done here.
I was done here 3 months ago. I told you then I'd give you Jer, and that was that. I'm not your inside line, and I'm not your boy.
That's not very
You know what I'm in if the wrong yegg saw me pulled in here?
What are you in?
No. And no more of these informal chats either. You got a discipline issue with me? Write me up or suspend me. And I'll see you at the parent conference.
Brick is the story of a high schooler investigating the murder of his ex-girlfriend, but the real draw is the anachronism of a film noir getting placed squarely and unabashedly into the power circles of a modern-day high school. It's effectively the same trick pulled for Jane Austen and Shakespeare that provides a new lens through which to view the old reliables, but Rian Johnson brings the tropes of a genre he obviously loves into present day. Won't be his last, obviously, Benoit Blanc, etc. In fact, Knives Out could probably be a decent pick for every one of these categories, but it won't be. The true benefit of putting a 40s-style detective yarn in a high school from the early aughts is that the effect cuts both ways. The setting highlights the tropes of the hard-boiled gumshoe, allowing you to examine them in ways you hadn't seen before, while those same tropes map seamlessly onto the experience of a modern teenager in surprising and engaging ways. With Brick, Rian Johnson was able to make two movies. One, a Dashiell Hammett-inspired whodunit, and another about dealing with loss as a teenager, all thanks to the film's setting. We've got our locations squared away, but before the bodies start dropping, we first must meet the ensemble. Any film's opening act should be filled with introductions and expositions. However, a mystery needs to be rooted not only in the getting-to-know-you details of its characters, but also in motive and opportunity and all those other deliciously murderous words. Everything that comes later, every layered piece of our unraveling mystery depends on the ensemble being clearly and carefully drawn. This is where the Agatha Christie devotees truly shine. Knives Out and Glass Onion, of course, paint detailed portraits of every suspect. Clue gives slapstick purpose to what had been illustrated caricatures on a board game box. See How They Run is a ton of goofy meta fun, and Bad Times at the El Royale isn't necessarily a mystery so much as it is striving to be mysterious, but the character setups are nonetheless pulling in the right direction. For our number 9 pick, though, we need to look at the upstairs and down of Gosford Park.
Most of it takes place at a shooting party in a country house, sort of like this one, actually. Murder in the middle of the night, a lot of guests for the weekend, everyone's a suspect, that sort of thing.
How horrid.
Gosford Park is, as far as screen time goes, more setup than it is mystery. It's an hour 20 into its 2+ hour runtime before a body is discovered and a piercing scream is heard from the other room. This means over half the movie is dedicated to the layered, nuanced, and antiquated dynamic between the household staff and guests of a 1930s shooting party at an English estate. But for as beefy as the front half of the film is, Robert Altman and co. don't waste a frame of it. By the time it even begins to be a murder mystery, we know these characters intimately. Who hates who and why? The gossip we hear downstairs and the open disdain masquerading as politeness displayed upstairs play out like a dark comedy, but only because we know each of them so well. Suspicions rise to the fore. There are hints and red herrings, trust and mistrust flickering out of the corner of eyes. Motives are placed casually because, and this is why Gosford Park works so well as a murder mystery, that seems to be par for the course at Gosford Park anyway. The schemes and grudges held that are at the center of every character arriving for the hunt are no big secrets. Everybody knows Lady Sylvia's aunt is worried about her allowance, and her brother-in-law is desperate. The characters exist in a state of ready-made motive for murder, and the first 60% of Gosford Park is a masterclass on presenting an ensemble. We've got the setting and our cast assembled, so let's get down to the reason we're all here. Brutal and grisly murder. You can't have a mystery without a crime, so let's find ourselves a good one. Sometimes the planning of the crime can be just as fascinating as unraveling whodunit, like the plot of a no-good husband to dispatch his wife in Dial M for Murder, or a wife dispatching her no-good husband in Diabolique. But that's on the opposite side of things. We're looking for a mystery to solve that's not, how are they going to get away with this? There's the baffling disappearance in Frantic that makes him question his whole marriage. It's Buffalo Bill's kidnapping spree that results in one of cinema's most unsettling wardrobe upgrades. There's another interesting take on a crime that's ongoing in the stalking of Midnight Lace, and a more recent version of the old reliable lights go out and a body is discovered trope in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. But no crime is ever quite as good as the one that actually works, like David Fincher's Seven.
There are 7 deadly sins, Captain. Gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, pride, lust, and envy. 7.
Hold on. That's not even my desk.
You can expect 5 more of these.
Even in the beginning of John Doe's crime spree, it's clear this crime is something different, if only by the way the film's 2 protagonists respond to it. The body of the man representing gluttony has Morgan Freeman's seasoned Detective Somerset wanting to stay away from it, while his fiery young partner, Brad Pitt's Detective Mills, can't wait to take on the enigmatic and bizarre case. So, as it begins, the crime is pulling double duty, both as an intriguing and disturbing mystery and a benchmark for the development of the 2 detectives' characters and their relationship.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a homicide.
As the scope of the crime unfolds, the true nature of its purpose revealed, it's not just about finding the perpetrator. Mills and Somerset have to come to terms with the nature of the work they do and the world around them. Mills has to grow up, Somerset has to teach, all because of the disturbingly plotted murders. So many things are swirling around now in our mysterious brew. We've got an intriguing locale, a cast of suspects clearly drawn, and a crime begging to be solved. It's time to bring in the authorities. Our mystery needs a detective smart enough and capable enough to pull all the threads together so that justice might be served. Of course, your Sherlocks and Poirots fit here, but the beauty of a good detective is that those heavy hitters can sit alongside the small-town stalwartness of Fargo's Marge Gunderson. And they've done such a good job establishing the tropes that the Frank Drebins and Clouseaus of the comedy end of the detective spectrum are just as iconic. Really, you want the detective to be as memorable as the crime, if not more so. For this, we look to everybody from the Thin Man's duo of Nick and Nora Charles solving crimes and being fabulous while they do it, to India's truth-seeker detective Byomkesh Bakshi. But a good detective, I feel, needs a certain degree of obsession, like with the fairy tale Everyman played by Kyle MacLachlan in Blue Velvet, John Cho's terrified father in Searching, and even though Detective Mark McPherson might have done it first in Laura, the heights-averse John Ferguson from Vertigo is obsessed as hell. But I want my detective to have a really compelling reason to want the bad guy captured, and for this, I'm going farther back to Fritz Lang's all-timer, M.
Nein, nein. Kein Irrtum. Kennen Sie das? So einen Ballon hast du doch der kleinen Elsie Beckmann geschenkt. So einen Ballon. Elsie. Nein! 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 Wo hast du die kleine Mackerperl verscharrt, du Hund?
The story of a child murderer on the loose in Berlin, Peter Lorre's Hans Beckert is ultimately found and put on trial by the rest of the city's criminals. Thanks to the added scrutiny by a desperate police force, Berlin's underworld was so thoroughly put out by Beckert's continued killing that they take matters into their own hands and become the detectives themselves. By handing the detective role over in part to Berlin's crime bosses, the film asks the question, who has the most to gain from taking this criminal off the streets? It's a fascinating twist on detective tropes that were, of course, still forming in 1930s cinema, but it's an early and interesting example of subverting the expectation by giving the detectives an intriguing reason to solve the case. With our detective on the scene and ready to get to work, it's time to start following clues. And for our cobbled together conspiracy wall filmmaking experiment here, we need to find a movie that knows how to drop those breadcrumbs. Take Blow Up and its sort of remake Blow Out, leaving clues in a creative professional's wheelhouse. Conversation does the same thing, just without any sort of closure at the end of the day. Meanwhile, the clues left in Memories of Murder are made more interesting by the opposing manner in which the detectives gather and interpret them, one with his gut, the other more methodically. What's great about Memories of Murder, though, is how the case and the clues are intertwined with the character arcs of the two leads as the case weighs on them enough to affect change. And while that might be enough to merit a number 6 spot on most of our lists, I'd like to take it one step further and talk about movies that leave clues for us, the viewer. A good mystery should, of course, always allow us to tag along with its solving, but think of a film like Memento, slow playing the detective work in accordance with the protagonist's broken memory. There's a narrative function that exists outside the plot and solely for the audience's experience, but my favorite version of this is not a murder mystery at all, but a lovely piece of science fiction in Denis Villeneuve's Arrival.
Oh my God. Are you getting this? Yes, sir. It's uploading back to base camp. Louise, that's incredible.
It's important when assembling the perfect mystery to look outside the obvious for inspiration from unexpected sources. And while the global drama brought on by the titular Arrival is 100% science fiction, it is also, for its part, a mystery. Amy Adams' Louise Banks is tasked with communicating with the aliens, which effectively means unraveling the mystery of why they have in fact arrived. In the same way that Memento's clues are distributed for our benefit as viewers, Arrival starts hinting subtly in the form of opening narration that you may not realize is actually filled with clues until a repeat viewing. Then they retreat to the background as a flashback to trauma that informs Louise's work on the mystery at the film's surface, unraveling at the UFO site in Montana. By the time the film reveals the nature of the clues it's been surreptitiously dropping since the opening frames, it is a heartbreaking moment that changes our understanding of what the mystery even was in the first place. The film becomes about two parallel mysteries, one of concrete answers surrounding the motives of aliens, and the other a much bigger, much more captivating question about the way we exist together. Following clues is one thing, but knowing which clues to follow is another. A good red herring can throw both the audience and the detective off the scent, both of which are necessary to any mystery worth our time. Most of the time it refers to suspects, who to trust, who to watch out for. This is Reggie pinballing back and forth between would-be allies in charade, or sometimes the entire premise hangs on a red herring, like the mistaken identity that sets the plot of North by Northwest in motion. But it can also be mysteries that start in one place and end in another, a go-to for most of your favorite noirs, like The Maltese Falcon or The Big Sleep. Psycho is another Mount Rushmore example of this, with the whole focus of the movie pivoting hard halfway through. There's also a wonderful, pulpy little Agatha Christie devotee called The Last about a group of Hollywood friends on a yacht belonging to the richest among them for a weekend of high-stakes parlor games. The truth behind the invitations, the motives for gathering this group 1 year after one of their members' mysterious death and a fresh murder or two to boot, make for a whodunit with everything you could ask for, including a great cast, featuring Raquel Welch, a young Ian McShane, and this guy, who, if he wasn't the direct inspiration for Toast of London's Ray Purchase, My Life's a Farce.
Ray Purchase. Well, well, well.
My Life's a Farce too. But for our number 5 pick and one of our favorite red herring riddled bits of cinema, we're going with Christopher Nolan's The Prestige.
That a cipher?
It's a rotating transposition that shifts every day of the diary. It's simple but time-consuming to translate, even when you have the 5-letter keyword.
Which is?
We magicians have a circle of trust.
You have a circle of trust with someone whose diary you stole?
Maybe I bought it.
And you're hoping to find a great secret in there.
I've already found it. That's why I'm here.
A grudge match between turn-of-the-century magicians plays out in usual Christopher Nolan fashion, which is to say, non-linearly across space and time, while each of the men digs into the other's diary, desperate to uncover their rival's secret, as if knowing exactly how they perform their tricks is the whole game. The beauty of telling a story about magicians, particularly in the 3 steps of any magic trick, is that Nolan performs one in front of you. After all, what is an illusionist's distraction if not a red herring? Which makes The Prestige a perfect example for our purposes here, and the perfect cover for dueling mysteries around dueling illusions. The mystery of how the transported man is pulled off is just one of the mysteries the film concerns itself with. The titular Prestige is the reveal of the other. Each misdirection is a red herring on Borden and Angier's journey to discover the truth, that there is no limit to their obsessions.
It won't bring your wife back.
I don't care about my wife, I care about his secret.
The movie itself is relentless as well, making you think you know what's happening time and time again, right up until the credits roll. To this point, we've got a movie set in high school about a religious-themed serial killer who's caught by the local crime bosses by deciphering an alien language while keeping their rivals at bay with magic tricks. And actually, yeah, I'd watch that. Except now we need a proper villain. It's time to reveal the big bad, and a good mysteries villain obscures their intention and hides their motives. In other genres, the bad guy is in a black hat. Antagonists are often obviously marked as such from their first frame on screen, but in the interests of discovering a villain along with our protagonists, let's keep things mysterious, shall we? This is a popular way to build suspense around horror antagonists and twisty endings. So apologies for spoiling some movies here, but this is the dual killers in Scream, the truth about Harrison Ford and what lies beneath, and the origins of the haunting in the Night House. But the narrative shift in Gone Girl qualifies here as well. The weird and farcical sleuth plays a cat and mouse game with who's actually perpetrating a crime against whom, but for our number 4 pick, we're looking at the incredible Dutch thriller, The Vanishing.
Qu'est-ce que t'as? Jamais là. Je vais à la mer la semaine prochaine.
What's fascinating about this movie is the structure of it, not the narrative. A young woman, Saskia, is abducted and, as the title suggests, seems to vanish into thin air, sending her boyfriend Rex into a years-long obsession with finding her. Early in the runtime of the film, we know exactly who the kidnapper is, a sociopathic chemist named Raymond, so the reveal of the villain here isn't just about justice being served or comeuppance being dished out. While we certainly know who the villain is before Rex does, the savviest part of the film is that it spends most of its runtime discovering the why and the methodology behind the kidnapping. And I always feel like by the time I get to number 4 on these lists, I finally notice a little trend. So here with The Vanishing is a movie where the kidnapping and murder of Saskia was not actually the primary mystery the film is dealing with. Instead, Saskia was collateral damage for Raymond's attempt at solving his own mystery. whether or not he was capable of something truly horrendous. By showing him practice with chloroform, clumsily fumble a few early attempts, and refine his procedure until it works, The Vanishing is a kind of backstage view of a villain behind a mystery, and the film is all the more terrifying for it. By now, there might be some of you watching thinking, those villain reveals kind of feel like twists, and I feel like you might have even used the word twisty in that last section. And, well, you'd be right on both counts. But even after the shocking discovery of the true villain, or the shocking discovery of what that villain truly did, what if things are still not as they seem? Films like Primal Fear feature villain turns that recontextualize the whole film. The Sixth Sense leads the modern pack of twists that drastically change a rewatch. The Game and more playful Game Night do the same, with final reels that beg for repeat viewing. Shutter Island does a fantastic job of it as well, and DiCaprio's measured, almost stilted acting sell the premise, and it's a performance that deserves recognition in this spot. But the mystery twist we most want to talk about comes from Sweden and Ingmar Bergman's Hour of the Wolf.
Det är bara min svartsjuka. Gå i vägen, är snäll. Visst. Visst. Naturligtvis.
What's fascinating about this particular twist is that it happens slowly. There's no aha moment or spike in the score to signal that they were really ghosts all along. But if I can define a twist as the point at which a film is not what it initially seemed to be, Hour of the Wolf begins twisting right away and just never stops. The movie sets up its mystery in the opening titles, describing the circumstances under which the movie was made, and subsequently highlights the madness of an artist of some renown. It's all fictional, of course, but it brilliantly plants a realistic seed in your mind right out of the gate. You now have a pivot point on which the film begins its twisting. On an isolated island with a doomed painter and his pregnant wife, exactly whose madness we're witnessing becomes something of a debate, or a mystery. Is the diary of this painter reliable, or the scribblings of a man already gone mad? The other characters are either real, ill-meaning neighbors, or terrible, imagined demons from the past. The film asks the cost of hiding our internal state of mind from the people that should be closest to us, and how destructive admitting that can be. And that's where this sort of slow burn twist gets really interesting to dissect. The confusion as to whose madness, who is trapped in whose visions, allows Bergman to place us in the middle of a crumbling relationship. A marriage that can't survive a ghost from the past and can't stop morphing with every new question posed or revelation discovered. Hour of the Wolf is a hallucinatory look at relationships and whether or not they can ever be repaired through the lens of one of the greats. On top of everything else, it's just a very Bergman movie and worth a look if you haven't seen it already. Well, good news, everybody. Things are all wrapped up. Or they are very much not. Both of those options, by the way, can be satisfying ways to close out a mystery. Or not. The point here is, no matter which way you go, sticking the landing on a good mystery is tough. A neat little bow can easily be seen coming from a mile away, while a delightfully murky ending is just one false note from a disappointing lack of closure. But for every fumbled third act, there are great examples of absolutely nailed resolutions as well. There's the sudden burst of violence at the end of Chinatown that's just as affecting as the "did you hear something" energy at the end of Prisoners. It's the resolution by gunfire of The Long Goodbye that makes just as much sense as a foolproof plan that finds a loophole at the last second as in Fallen. We discover the meaning behind Rosebud very definitively in Citizen Kane, but Picnic at Hanging Rock is just as effective with a nebulous ending that makes you think everything you've just watched might have really happened. There's also the sort of movie that kind of has both, like Oldboy, unveiling its mystery only to then offer less definitive final moments. And for our number 2, we're going to stay in that realm, but take a look at a master at work in Kurosawa's Rashomon.
どうして何がわからんのだこんな不思議な話見たことないんだだから話してみなよいい塩梅にここには物知りらしい坊さんもいるこった
I love a good ending with a lack of closure for a mystery because the mystery is then allowed to persist after the credits roll. I believe the best movies in general are the ones where the lights come back on in the theater and you're still wondering about what happened. Rashomon, built on differing accounts of a murder and sexual assault in classical Japan, is one of the most thoroughly analyzed films of all time, so there's absolutely nothing new to be said about it. But I'm picking Rashomon here because the whole movie is a mystery left unanswered. It's the entire point. It's got everything we've asked a mystery to have up to this point: intriguing locales, from the city gates in the rain to an open-air court, a cast of characters clearly drawn with distinct perspectives, one of whom speaks through a medium, which is cool. And there are bits of truth and similarity peppered throughout each of the stories, offering twists and turns with each retelling. Clues unravel, and ultimately, all the information is coming secondhand from the conversations at the city gate. But for where mystery movies are concerned, Rashomon is an entire film about how impossible a clean and unimpeachable version of events can be. Sifting through the stories is difficult and frustrating, but makes for a fascinating conclusion to a mystery. We've arrived at the end of our mystery assemblage, having already talked about the resolution, which is weird. So, for our ending, let's devote our number one pick to the total stressful package. If you're not worried about the outcome of a mystery, if you're not at least a little bit squeamish as to how it's going to pan out, I don't think the mystery is doing its job quite right. So, for a harrowing experience from start to finish, Zodiac is about as good as it gets, dramatizing the real account of the hunt for an infamous killer. Funny Games isn't strictly a mystery, but it excels at mysteriously and stressfully playing with the rules that even it is playing by. Eyes Wide Shut similarly never lets you feel comfortable enough with the world Tom Cruise's Dr. Harford is rabbit-holing into, while The Lives of Others uses its Cold War setting for all it's worth with relentless who's watching who flavored suspicion. But for my number one, the mystery that plays with all these tropes in terrifyingly unique ways, I'm going with Karen Kusama's The Invitation.
To a better world. To peace. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Don't drink it! Don't fucking touch it! Will!
The setting is one everybody is familiar with. Old friends reunited at a dinner party, which is the first thing that makes this movie so stressful. The suspects are introduced, dropping hints about their pasts, the fractured relationships that led to such a long time away from each other, and leaving even vaguer notions about what might be happening next. The film keeps a knife-twisting, slow-burn energy that combines the nervousness we feel as an audience waiting for the other shoe to drop with the social anxiety of having to navigate an evening with old friends during which said old friends are acting just a bit off. The sense that something's not right, the doubt that maybe it's just you feeling that, the anxiety around friendships that aren't the same as they used to be, all of it combines to make you squirm in your seat from the opening frames. By the time the twist comes, you're left wondering what you would have done in that same familiar situation. At what point during the evening would you have left? And would it have been soon enough? With The Invitation, Karen Kusama adds a horror sensibility to a social scenario that we all kinda dread to begin with. The slow build of tension and unease, the reveal of the dinner party's true purpose, it all leads to questions that stuck with me for a long time after I first saw it, which is why I think it's one of the best mystery films of all time. Well, what do you think? How'd our mystery turn out? Did we leave out any of your favorites? Maybe I did it on purpose. The only way you'll know for certain is to be sure and like and subscribe for more CineFix movie lists.